A very good evening and assalamu alaikum. We are coming to you live from Nasrec, where the president has just delivered his political report highlighting so many things that has happened within the organization, within South Africa, because he represents the president of not just the ANC, but South Africa. So his diagnosis came in a multitude of ways. Today or tonight, we are joined by Angelo Fick, who is the director of research at ASRI, and he's also he's also part of the SABC panel of analysts. Very good evening to you, and welcome to Salam Media.
Alaikum assalam to you.
Just to start off, I just want to get, what is your feel towards what has been happening? We can take it from the morning, from conference delays. What do you make of this?
So I think the delays reveal the organizational difficulties the ANC is having in terms of organizing the conference to make it start on time. And that's not just an accident. I think that that's part of having delayed dealing with its business until almost the very last minute, the disciplinary issues earlier this week. So I think it reveals something about the state of the organization's ability to mount this conference and do so effectively.
Right. I hear that you speak about the organization being disorganized. Would you also say that it would be part of managing delegates? We do know that delegates from different regions don't necessarily support candidates. Do you think that this could also be attributed to the delays, or do you think that it's just something that's deeply rooted within the ANC or within politics in general?
I think for the African National Congress, the trouble, and they have signaled this themselves, starts at the branch level.
Right.
So they've had political disciplinary problems from the branch level up. They've had concerns about auditing branches, and this goes back 10, 12 years. And so how delegates come from branches and with what mandate they arrive at conference, that's been an issue. And then discipline has also been a matter of concern, in addition to which political education. So if you add all of these things up, managing this is going to be difficult, but there are particular difficulties this year because of the top six officials, 3 positions are held by one person because the party's secretary general is suspended, its deputy secretary general has died, and its treasurer general is managing both those portfolios. So what you're sitting with is the difficulty of not just bottom-up trouble of organizing, but if at the very top, one person manages all of these things, the Secretariat's position and job has always been to manage some of these matters, and that becomes infinitely more difficult. So in addition to the usual, which delegates arrive, do they support the candidates, and which are vetted and accredited and can get accreditation, there's also the problem of bottom-up issues and managing the organization top-down. And those are not easy challenges.
No, that actually makes sense when you put it in that way. Let's move into the media briefing that the national spokesperson gave this morning. We were all anticipating to see what the NEC decision would be for those members who, for example, voted against party lines. But the spokesperson coming out and stating that no, they will just push it to the next NEC. What do you read from that? Is it something of moving away from accountability rather, or would you say that it is just a matter that they feel they should not deal with currently, taking into consideration what's currently happening? What do you read from that?
I think it was a practical consideration. So something that Pule Mabe said, which is they don't want conference to collapse.
Okay.
So instead of focusing on disciplining these particular very small number of people who are deployed into parliament for the party, they've chosen to have the new NEC deal with it, so that they don't have that as the major stumbling block to proceeding with this conference. So if the delay has already happened, and we only get to hear the president address the party 8 or so hours after he was scheduled to do so, the concern was if you then also bring in disciplinary matters and the difficulty with getting people accredited, you might have no conference begin on the first day. And that's not a good signal the ANC might want to send out. So I think that they chose the practical route. The difficulty that they now have is having kicked it down the road. If the election outcomes are what they think they're going to be, this will be easy to deal with. But if they sit with a split NEC as they did at the end of 2017, that process may become messy and protracted, which I don't think the ANC, one, can afford or wants to even engage in.
Okay, interesting. Before we come to the organizational report, we saw the veterans protesting outside. We saw the likes of Ace Magashule, the former Secretary General of the ANC, being present, and he stated that he has been, suspended, and he's not a voting delegate. Um, what do we read from this? Is it usual for I wouldn't say for suspended secretary generals, because I'm sure that hasn't happened, in the past, but what can we read from that? Is that a sign of desperation from Ace Makashule's side, or is it a state of being interested in the politics of the ANC? Because even though he's suspended, he does have an influence. What do we read from that? As
I
well
think
as, my apologies, Lindiwe Sisulu joining him outside, joining the veterans and saying that they would take their memorandums forward.
so. I think the difficulty for people who've spent their entire lives inside this organization, the phrase used to be "it's very cold outside the ANC,"
Right.
is they cannot easily conceive of an existence beyond the ANC. And in this sense, they are not alone. Thousands of ANC members and supporters can't conceive of life beyond the ANC. And for a very long time, the ANC held that South Africa couldn't be conceived of beyond the ANC. But we've learnt over the last few elections that millions of South Africans have begun to do that by not voting for the party. And so the lowered electoral returns is an indication of this. The second problem, of course, is that those people who stood outside do want to be on the inside, but they also want to be on the inside on their own terms rather than on the terms that the NEC has set, the Working Committee has set, the Disciplinary Committee has set. And so taking the Veterans League issues back to the NEC and to the party structures is interesting, given that the president in his report mentioned a new structure that is supposed to represent war and ANC MK veterans. And so the structures of the ANC that have traditionally been strong, the Women's League, the Youth League, the Veterans League, have had to be reconfigured in this renewal process. And some people are going to have to be left out in the cold, outside conferences, and may be present as members of the ANC, but not as voting members. And this may be part of the consolidation by the incumbents under Mr. Ramaphosa, and it may be a desire by people who want to join a renewed ANC because they have their eye on 2024 and don't want to sit at below 50%.
Do you think this consolidating that you're speaking about, do you think it would take shape or form should someone outside the Ramaphosa faction emerge victorious in the next few days? Do you think this consolidating, this new strategy of formation, do you think it would be continued?
It will probably be a new and different kind of consolidation. So under Mr. Ramaphosa, if he is re-elected, a certain kind of consolidation will happen.
Right.
And there'll be a certain kind of, one hates to use the word, but purging.
Right.
So there will be people who will have to go. And if they voted against Mr. Ramaphosa, if they've been defying him all year, it'll be very difficult to see them surviving into 2023. If Mr. Ramaphosa is not re-elected, whoever comes in, whether it's Oma Shatile, Didi Mabuza, Zweli Mkhize, they will have to do their own kind of consolidation. And we've seen a version of this when there was a shift from Mr. Mbeki to Mr. Zuma. And people who supported Mr. Ramaphosa may have to find themselves new spaces. Now, the imagination says, and the record says, that people who served under Thabo Mbeki found quite easily a new home.
Right.
Whether it was deployment to the United Nations or deployment to the African Development Bank or to other global institutions. And one imagines, given who these people are in the Ramaphosa camp, many of them will find similar positions. The concern is that those people who do not find themselves in the Ramaphosa camp, whether they are Lindiwe Sisulu or Ace Magashule, may not find a second home. And I think what many people in the party are asking themselves is, if there is to be a split, can the party survive the way it did the formation of COPE and the formation of the EFF? And before that, long before that, the formation of the PAC in the 1959-60 split. And the suggestion is that the party probably won't survive in the longer term as an electoral powerhouse that will retain government power if it splits again for the third time within 15 years.
Most definitely. That is quite interesting. And just as we close off, I want to get your take just quickly on the organizational report the political report rather by the president of the ANC, and what stood out for you.
So I think the organizational report reveals and reflects on the weaknesses in the organization, to some respects, honestly. Where I think it begins to fall short is that it is very much focused on the present and the immediate past and the immediate future of 2 years from now. I don't think it's focused enough on the second half of the century when the majority of young people have to survive into, and the majority of the people who deliver these reports and people like me will be dead. And so the world that the ANC envisages is very much a world that doesn't go beyond 2030. And I suspect that for the majority of young South Africans, 27 and younger, they will live into the second half of the century. And the report doesn't address the realities that are unfolding before us in this world, in this moment. And that includes the climate catastrophe, food insecurity, water insecurity, and collapse of infrastructure.
Thank you so much for that detailed analysis, and thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to speak to you soon. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah.
So that was Angelo Fick, the director of research at ASRI, and as well as an SABC panel of analysts, giving us his take on the political report as well as the happenings that we have seen throughout the day. You know, not just from the panel, but from the morning. And he touched on a whole range of things. You know, a lot of things on the youth issues, the fact that the report does not really reflect on everything that we would have wanted to hear. But yeah, I do.